Chris, everybody.
All right, so I know I'm in between everybody and drinking their dinner, so I promise I will not go too long here. All right, well, you're prepared. So my talk is called Kippo and Bits and Bits and Bits. A little bit about me first. I'm a dad and husband. I'm a security analyst for PPG Industries, and a lot of you probably have never heard of PPG Industries, although you should have, because we make the substance that makes the cheese stick to the Doritos. So we're a chemical company, amongst other things. That's one of our claims to fame, is we produce that, and I believe it's silica-based, so I don't know if you really should be applauding. I'm a full-time geek, a member of Hack Pittsburgh, and I want to put a plug in there for hackerspaces all over the country. If you're not a member of a hackerspace, you need to be. Every single time I visit my hackerspace, I learn something new. And so just, support them, join them, speak at them, whatever they need, help them out. I am at CanoBeans on Twitter. And another plug here that I'm just putting out there, I have my OSCP, which is the Offensive Security Certified Professional. And I have a slew of certs, and I could care less about any of them, but this one I'm really proud of. This is the Offensive Security, the folks who make Backtrack. This is their class. And yeah, right there. And it is absolutely, hands down, the hardest and most rewarding certification that I have. It's great. I can't say enough about it, and it's cheap. So especially if you do it online, go check it out. Highly recommend it. So that's enough about me, and let's move on. Yes, I'm CanoBeans. So my talk is on honeypotting. So let's start out by defining what a honeypot is. And actually, I'm going to interject here just for a second. I'm a big lemur fan, but apparently not big enough, because I didn't realize that Raleigh has the largest collection of lemurs outside of Madagascar. So as soon as I found that out, I made my Durham, whatever. Oh, Raleigh, Durham. Okay. Yes. So I picked. Yes. I picked lemurs for this presentation purely because I like lemurs, and then was like, oh shit, now I know what I'm doing on Monday. So I am going to see to check out the lemurs. Anyways, a honeypot, what is it? I'm going to define a honeypot as a security resource whose values lies in being probed, attacked, or compromised. Hopefully that sets it apart from your other systems. And there's two different kinds of honeypots. I'm going to kind of group them into two large categories: analysis and delay. So analysis would be for research, to research what the attackers are doing, take a look at what kind of attacks they're doing, what kind of malware they're dropping, things like that. You probably are familiar with HoneyD, the HoneyNet project. I would classify that as a research honeypot. Then there's things like a delay, like the La Brea tar pit, which purpose is purely to delay an attack. So a scanner sweeps it, and it keeps those connections open for a really long time just to slow the attacker down. I would also categorize that as a honeypot, but again, of the delay variety. So I want to talk a little bit about the rise and fall and rise again of the honeypot. And the reason I say this slide was originally the rise and fall, and I'll explain about that in a second. But the first written reference to a honeypot was in Cliff Stoll's book, The Cuckoo's Egg, which if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. He invented the SDINet project specifically to keep a hacker interested so he could learn more information about this particular attacker. He worked out of Berkeley Labs. It's a great read. It's not overly technical, but it's just kind of a fascinating piece of literature. And what's really interesting for me was, and I wonder how much it's really changed. I haven't interfaced directly with law enforcement in this case, in my experience, but Cliff really had a hard time getting. And again, this is it was written in, I believe it was published in '89, and his work was before that. Law enforcement just wasn't interested. He tried to get them interested, but there just wasn't much interest in what he was doing. In the early 2000s, the concept of honeypots was really hot. If you check out the internet and you look back if you Google for honeypot, you'll find tons of information, all of it from 10 years ago. It was really hot. Everybody was selling one. Symantec was selling Mantrap. There was Spectre, NetBait, KF Sensor. There were all kinds of honeypots out there. It was really, if you read, everybody was really excited about honeypots. And then kind of nothing. It just kind of faded at that point. Now when I was Googling, I ran across Patriot Box, and I saw this website, and I was really excited, and I was like, oh man, this is great. There's an active honeypot, and it's a Windows honeypot. And then I started reading, and it's like, it's only $39.99. And then it said, you know, it categorizes it as an IDS honeypot, which I can kind of see why you would characterize a honeypot as an IDS. But the more I started reading about it, the more I thought it was probably something from this guy. Now, no offense to anyone if they happen to work on the Patriot Box project, but yeah, it just started to look like something he'd write. So you're probably wondering, why is this lemur making out with John Cleese? And well, all right. And or you're wondering what happened to honeypots? Why did they go away? And I posed the question to Twitter when I first kind of conceptualized this and asked the Twitterverse, why no honeypots? And I got one really good response, and it was from Nick Harbour, who is a malware analyst from Mandiant, I think is the name of the company. He responded, and this is his quote: "Maybe because it's a waste of time and never improved security." And I was like, oh, well, that kind of hurts my heart. But okay, so maybe that's true. But I think probably the honeypot died because it's died, in the sense that commercial vendors lost interest in it. Let me put that's what I mean by died. Because it's hard to get information out of. I don't think it's kind of the click drool product that you can put out there and get all kinds of amazing analysis. And I think that's probably why it was a little bit more of a tough sell. Now I say that, and as you see, this you probably can't see it there. It says published 17 April 2011. So right as I was getting ready and finalizing my presentation, I discovered that Symantec is now selling honeypots again. They just announced that they are selling, now this is to select individuals. They say US government agencies, NATO, and major corporations. They have always, you know, the malware vendors have always maintained honeypots to collect malware. And apparently, according to the article, the other vendors were quite shocked by Symantec's announcement to start selling this product again. So that's why I said the rise and fall and rise again, because I have to believe that if Symantec's doing it, the other companies are going to start doing it again as well. And not sure how far that's going to go. Like I said, Symantec's have very narrowly limited who they're going to be selling it to, supposedly. So this is how I feel about honeypots. Lenny Zeltser summed it up here, and as you're all very capable of reading. But I think what's really interesting is he talks about the mature enterprise. And I think that is probably the key. Honeypot should absolutely not be the first piece of technology you deploy in your organization, but I think there is value in a mature organization. Like he says, you know, you don't get a ton of false positives off of a honeypot, because ideally a honeypot shouldn't see any traffic other than malicious traffic, because again, it has no production value. Again, malware samples, and it gives you an idea into the intruder's intentions. However, I don't want to say that, you know, that a honeypot is a panacea. Like I said, I think it's for a mature enterprise could consider it. But there are real issues with deploying a honeypot in an organization. And I say that because, for example, I don't think I would want to. I would tell you, I can't convince my boss to run a honeypot. But if I could, I don't think if we had to have a QSA come in and I had to explain to him what this honeypot was, that would necessarily fly very well. Again, because this is an intentionally, in the cases that I'm looking at, this is an intentionally vulnerable system. And that would be a tough sell to anyone. You know, so for compliance requirements, again, there may be reasons why a honeypot just wouldn't work in an organization. But for me, it's a really fun Friday night. I had a great time doing this stuff. So I'm going to talk about Kippo first. And Kippo is a medium interaction SSH honeypot. And what I want to define the difference is on what a medium, low, high interaction honeypot is. A low interaction honeypot is strictly a honeypot that mimics some network service, but that's as far as it goes. It appears to be a network service, period, done. You poke it, it says I'm a network service, done. Medium interaction is getting a little bit more interactive. It mimics an operating system so that you can see, you can have a little fuller experience. And then when you get to a high interaction honeypot, that is a system that actually appears to be the entire OS or is a full-blown operating system. Kippo is a breeze to install. These are the requirements for Kippo. Kippo is an SSH honeypot. It's a piece of cake to install. As a matter of fact, that line right there will get you up and running on Ubuntu, which is where I ran Kippo. Download Kippo, extract, and go. It's that simple, sort of. You do have to tweak, you do want to tweak, you don't have to, you do want to tweak the Kippo config file. You can, by default, its SSH port, I believe, is 2222. You can change the host name, and what it does is it implements a root account. And again, it's all mimicking SSH. It's not really SSH. It creates a root account with a password that is configurable in there, and it's supposed to be an easy password because this is to attract brute force attacks. This should be obvious. You would really have to work to do this because Kippo checks to make sure you're not running as root, but don't run this as root because if this is running on an operating system that you don't want to get owned, you probably don't want to run Kippo as root. Like I said, you have to work at it. If you try to run it as root, Kippo complains and says, hey, you're being dumb. But just want to put that out there. The other thing you might want to do is, again, you're running as an unprivileged user. So what I did was I used this IP tables command to simply redirect any incoming traffic on 22 to port 2222, which is where Kippo was actually running. So once you set that up, you sit back and wait. Now what I did was I ran Kippo on 2 disparate systems. I ran 2 VPSs on 2 different companies hosted in 2 different locations just to kind of see what kind of information I could collect. The VPSs are so cheap nowadays that I just wanted to see if I saw anything different between the 2. And when you're looking at Kippo, these are the directories you're interested in. The DL directory will contain all of the malware that the people who connected to your machine tried to upload. So you'll see that in the DL directory. The log directory will contain a log of all of the brute force attempts and where they originated from. And the TTY directory, the neatest thing about Kippo is that it enables VCR-like playback of what the attacker did, and I'll demo that in a second. And that is contained in the TTY directory. So that is the live demo god, because you need to worship him, because I know this isn't going to work. Okay, so now what I'm going to show you here is an actual session that was captured on one of my honeypots. So this is an actual attacker interacting with my honeypot. Now again, this is all running in Kippo, so it mimics the operating system, but it isn't a full-blown implementation of the OS, obviously. Yep. Oh yeah, hold on. Let me do that. Is that any better? All right, hopefully this. Okay, so I named it SSL web server. Again, this is the actual attacker attacking. He's in, he clears the history. And this is what I think is so marvelous about Kippo, is that you get this. He's going to take a look to see what kind of environment he's working in. He's going to reset the root password. I don't know what he tried to set it to. I know what it was. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. and he changed it to something else. So he's going to go ahead and download his malware kit here.
That was my luggage.
It absolutely is running. It's actually fetching what he wants. I don't think it actually runs wget. I think it does the HTTP pull of what he wants. I think, yes. So, and the best thing is, what you're actually seeing is his program is blowing up because he's trying to run in this emulated SSH environment. And now he's kind of getting annoyed because he can't figure out why his crap isn't working. And then coming up here is also one of my favorite parts about Kippo. So again, he's just trying to figure out why his little malware thing isn't working.
What a diligent troubleshooter.
Yeah, I mean he is. He is.
Troubleshooting his malware.
Right. Yeah, he's checking on the kernel version. Right. And then he exits. And this is the best thing about Kippo is Kippo doesn't let you exit. It drops you to another prompt. So he's a little confused here at this point. He's trying to run some more tools. And then he'll do, you know, he's like, you know, what the hell's going on here?
Is there like a pause where he gets like a drink or something?
No.
And he's like, what the fuck did this
So I think honestly at this point he doesn't know which prompt he's at. Honestly is what I think. Then he exits again, and he's still at it.
Wow.
So, and I think at this point he gets smart, and well, no, he tries to exit again, and then it's at this point where I think he gets pissed and leaves.
Can you play that again with the acting stack?
I'm surprised he doesn't leave a text file somewhere.
All right.
I hate this.
All right, so that's.
So what you're saying is it's actually not only a honeypot, it's also a way to torture people.
Right, right. So what I thought I learned, and despite that last presentation there, the enemy was smarter than I thought. And the reason I say that is because after watching a bunch of them, Kippo doesn't do. It's not a real implementation. So there were things that they obviously have learned to check for to see if it's a honeypot. Silly things. I mean, silly things that the Kippo doesn't like. The etc password file is blank in Kippo. So I started learning and kind of making my stuff look more real because I was watching what they were doing. You can pull things into the file system for Kippo. So I started making things look real. And I thought they were Chinese. And I put that in there because a lot of the IPs, and not all of them, I didn't check out all of them, but a lot of the IPs were coming from China. And I kind of thought that was boring because I was like, well, yeah, that's what I expected, right? So the next thing is I said, well, geez, Kippo was fun, but should I really stop there? Should I really just stop? Because again, they couldn't do what they wanted to do. So I have a real good friend who's an attorney back home who said that I really needed to put this disclaimer in. My machine that I'm going to show you was actively used in attacks against other people. So if you do what I did, your machine could get used in attacks against other people. That might earn you a pair of these. If it earns you a pair of these, it might earn you some of this. But most likely,
I love that scene, by the way.
that series was phenomenal.
Oh, God.
But more than likely, it's going to earn you this, which is no internet because you violated your terms of service. So this is what I set up. Now, over on the left is where I set up my honeypot network. Over on the right is where I keep my porn. Or my home, the rest of my home network. That's the important stuff, right? No, that's all that's important over there. So what I set up here was the stuff on the left is a ESX server running 4 hosts. One of the hosts is pfSense, which if you haven't checked out pfSense, it is an amazing firewall product. a Linux client, and I'll explain why the Linux client in a second, a snort box, and a Linux box with a horrible root password. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because they seem to get that relatively quickly for obvious reasons. Now, what I did was, on the Linux box, I used non-persistent disk so that they could get in there, do whatever they wanted. I could reboot it, cold start it, boom, they're gone, and I start fresh. So that's what was the situation there. I ran snort purely because I was just curious to see if they would launch any other kind of attacks, per se, from my box once they had rooted it. And the other box, the Linux client box that I said I would explain, this segment of the network was completely isolated from my network. And again, I was using non-persistent disk. So anything I captured interesting on the box, if it rebooted, it was poof, it was gone. So I had a way to move things in and out. So that Linux client box was there. I'd power him up, use him as a middle point. He was allowed to bridge the two networks, and then I'd shut him down. And that was what that machine, the purpose of that machine. So what I did for my honeypot was I used sudo sh. I masked it. That's in quotes because I purely created a link and called it KSH. And we still use corn shell at work, which makes me real sad. And so that's why I put that in there. I didn't try very hard to be secretive, and I used a hacked SSH binary. Now what I did was I wanted to be able to capture username and password and IP address from the attackers, but I wanted to run real SSH. So I changed auth password in SSH, recompiled it, and this is my code. It's available here again if anybody wants to play with it. I'm not a C programmer by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm sure it could be done more elegantly, more cleanly, but it works. And it's available there with the caveat, don't use this in a production environment. If you do, you're dumb, because it will capture your username and password in clear text. So this is what the output looks like. It gives you a timestamp, the account, the password, and the IP that they were coming from, just to give you an idea. I really was curious to catch that because Kippo gives you that, and I wanted to see if I saw anything different. So then I waited. Now, of course, the box was owned over and over and over again. The one thing I discovered was that it was almost always the same malware. There really wasn't much variation in it. It was almost always in the same places. They weren't very creative about where they hid the malware. And this time, unlike what I did in Kippo, because again, remember, I was running Kippo on a VPS out on the internet, I had a little more information. And most of that information, yeah?
Do you think that's because they might have been following instructions?
We'll get to that. That's coming up. That's coming up. So, but this time I had a little more information. I had some more details because what I had was my pfSense box sitting there collecting all of the traffic, collecting everything. Now, I was going to do a sudo sh live demo. I think because of time, I think I'm just going to skip it. If we want to see it again, sudo sh allows that VCR-like playback as well, so you can replay everything. You're going to see exactly what you saw in Kippo, and it runs about 3 minutes long, so I think I'm going to skip it. So I want to talk about what I found there. Most always, they were using IRC mechbot for command and control. They used pscan primarily for brute forcing. There was almost always a denial of service tool dropped. It was different tools, but it was almost always there. And then there was a user and password list. Now, the interesting thing about the user and password list was I collected several of them, and I went to the largest one that they had dropped, the largest collection of users and passwords that they had dropped. And there were a total of 233,000 combinations of username and passwords. And I was like, wow, that's a lot. And then I uniqued it, and there was only 138,000 uniques. So they were doing a whole lot of redundant work there that, again, may talk about what you guys were suggesting about the skill level of these attackers. So this is an example of what I was able to pull off of the pfSense box, because again, it was just sitting there capturing all of the traffic. Now this is them attempting to run an SSH brute force against someone else. They're just probing for SSH at this point. Now, because I knew that SSH was involved, and I knew that I guessed, let me put it this way, I guessed that spam was involved. I blocked at my pfSense any outbound SSH and any outbound SMTP. So what you're seeing here is their attacks, their SSH scans are just being black holed. So that's what I was able to capture. And then this is my machine actually being used in a denial of service attack against another host. And this was something I hadn't necessarily anticipated. And so I wasn't filtering this traffic. So this, again, my machine was used in an attack against somebody. I'll get into that in a second. So I don't want to give away the punchline just yet. So what I did was I started going through all the traffic. I had tons of traffic that I had captured. And again, I started looking for interesting clear text protocols. I knew they were using IRC, so I started looking at what they were doing on IRC. And again, going through that, looking at more IRC, I noticed that my machine connected to a machine or to a channel on IRC called Piccolo, P-I-C-O-L-L-O. And I decided that I wanted to join that channel and chat with those people. So what I did was I created a really thinly veiled excuse for why I was there. This is a Dragon Ball Z character whose name is Piccolo, which is very close to Piccolo. So what I did was, and again, I was not really trying, this was not any real clever social engineering attack. I just wanted a little explanation as to why I was there. So I joined their channel and said that I was a really big fan of Dragon Ball Z and was like, hey, what do you guys think about Dragon Ball Z? And so this was my identity. I was a 16-year-old kid, right? That's what I said. And because I knew my IP was going to track back to to generally my area, I was honest about where I was from. I said, I'm a 16-year-old from Pittsburgh who's really interested in Dragon Ball Z. And I was determined that we were going to become just the bestest of friends. So this is an example of what I was first greeted with when I joined the channel. As you can see, I've changed these names, and I'll explain in a minute why I've changed the nicknames. As you can see, this is the Sinzadi is issuing a command to the bots, and they're all checking in. So he's saying, say A, and they're all checking in. There was a lot of that in the channel. Then I joined the channel. Now, my nickname is real on here. I used Fava Bean, can of beans, Fava Bean. There's a connection there. So I was Fava Bean. I joined. And then as you can see, he issues a command to me, and I just imitate it, right? Say A. And then I was like, well, how come it doesn't work for me? And then I start my whole spiel about I'm a big Dragon Ball Z fan. And we have this conversation about how old we are. And again, remember, I'm going into this expecting that I'm dealing probably with folks from China. And I asked him about, he says he's 24, and I said, you're not too old for Dragon Ball, huh? And he smiles and said, I've seen cartoons once. And I said, I thought this was a channel for Dragon Ball.
Western Europe.
Well, he says he's from Europa. Which I thought was, again, I was like, oh, well, that's not what I expected. And then I realized that I wasn't dealing with APT, I was dealing with RPT, or Romanian persistent threat. I started looking through the logs at the languages that were being spoken and trying to translate them in Google Translate, and it was all Romanian. 100%, these folks were all speaking Romanian to each other. So I started playing on that a little. And I dropped the whole Dragon Ball Z thing. That was done because I knew that was, not only was it probably not necessary because no one was questioning it, but I knew that they were obviously unfamiliar with it. So I started asking them lots of questions about Romania. I completely played into that. I was like, oh, wow, I don't know anything about Romania. Again, I'm playing the role of a 13 or 16-year-old kid. I was reading on Wikipedia about Romania, and they were really, really happy to tell me all about Romania and brag about how awesome Romania was. And so we started, again, having more conversations, and I hung out in the channel for quite a while. And then I started asking them questions because, again, they're issuing commands to their bots in the channel, right in the clear, right in the channel. So I started asking them about what they were doing. And I asked what, because they issue a command, bang SSH and then an IP and the port. And I said, what's it do? And they said, it pings the server. And I said, well, he's doing it to multiple servers, and then he disappears. And I said, tell me, I want to know, I want to learn. So that was the new tact, was I started saying, geez, what you guys are doing looks really cool, I want to learn about it. And again, here's where our little conversation about Romania, and this conversation really struck me, because he's explaining that he's Romanian, and I'm like, wow, Romania was a kingdom. Who cares? And but I'm really playing into this idea that I think your country's awesome, and trying to play into that ego a little bit. And I asked him, I said, how old are you? And then he said 23, and I said, do you work or go to school? And he said, I'm stealing in other countries. He was very open about it. I'm stealing in another country. And I said, what? And he said, to survive. And I said, I don't understand. And he said, to survive, I steal. Now, there is honor amongst thieves. Again, these names have been changed. I was in the channel, and someone came on the channel and said, was bragging about all of the roots that they had. That was what the term they would use. Roots, you know, blah 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 roots. That seemed to be the lingo that they were throwing back and forth. And one of the really frustrating things was, I'm assuming that a lot of the language, and again, you know, if you did the same in English IRC as well, a lot of it was slang. So I'm sitting there with the Google Translate up and the thing, and I'm trying to copy and paste as quick as I can to capture what they're saying, and a lot of it wouldn't translate. But someone started, when I was saying, I really want to learn, can you tell me more about this? Someone said to me, look, I'll sell you a root for $1. Now again, remember, I'm on this facade that I am this 16-year-old kid. And I said, okay, I'm going to get my mom's PayPal account. How do I get you your $1? I said, I'm going to get her credit card and I'll pay you $1. And again, I'm playing stupid. Do I need to use Romanian PayPal? Like, I don't know exactly what I need to do here. And all of a sudden, my friend Raluca comes in and private messages me and says, man, stay chill. Don't buy roots like $1. They're not roots. And again, I'm playing on the line. I don't understand what you're talking about. He says he sends you money, he'll give you nothing, or he'll give you root, next day you don't have it. And so I said, well, how much should a root cost, right? I don't know. And he says $10 to $20 or euros for, he actually said euros, 10 to 20 euros for a good root, what he defined as a good root. He kept stressing to me that $1 roots are shit, in his words. So Raluca became my friend. And the reason I changed the names in the presentation is because I'm assuming this presentation is going to get posted somewhere. And I don't know who I'm actually dealing with here. To your question of who are these people, like what are they working for? Are they following a script? For all I know, this is Russian mob. And the last thing I want is this guy to disappear because he was blabbing to me about what they were doing. So everyone's IRC nicks are completely made up here. Those IP addresses are real. I didn't change those.
It could be worse. They could be working for a criminal organization in the US.
Right, right. I mean, that's the thing. I have no idea who they were. He was very talkative to me. Again, I asked him, you know, is it really a bad idea to use my mom's PayPal? And he says, you got to ask her. Like, which is the best thing about it. This guy really was just trying to help me out. He explains to me that he scans, you know, he'll scan almost 3,500 IPs at a time. And from there, he gets about 10 to 20 roots, which says how bad the passwords have to be on a lot of these hosts. And he says, you know, that's 200 euros. And he said, that's a lot of money. Now, the other thing about my friend Raluca is he told me that he was 16 years old. And he's 16 years old, and I can't remember if I have this in a future slide. He's 16 years old, and he explains to me that that $200 is 200 euros is a lot of money. Now I have no idea what the economy in Romania is. I know when I was 16, if I was pulling in $200 a week, I can only imagine what kind of nonsense I would have been getting into. But he even goes as far as to tell me what town he's from and the street. So that's where my friend Raluca lives. It seems to be a nice, a coastal town in Romania. Yeah, he let me know the street where he lived. I took this guy at his word because he jumped in to save me. So I think this guy really was he just wanted to chat. He was just telling me what was going on. The other thing is, I'm telling him again, I really want to learn how to do this, and he said, well, you need a root to do this. So, they were smart enough never to attack from their own machine. They were always getting on one machine and jumping from that machine. He explains the whole brute force thing, that it's 1,000 to 2,000 passwords. If it matches, bingo, I got root, and $20. And I asked him if he ever got in trouble, and he said, no, I'm not 18 years old, and he said in Romania I could go to prison for this. But they don't do it for anyone under 18. And I asked him, I said, don't you guys have juvie? And he had no idea what I was talking about. And I started saying, well, it's prison for kids. And then I thought, that just doesn't sound good. So we kind of changed the subject, and but he did it. Right. Yeah, you should come to America. We have prison for children. And so, so he said, he could be in. He could be in prison for this. And so I kept asking him, what do you guys do with all these? And he said, we scan for other routes, we flood, we spam, we make money. So the question I kept asking was, who do you sell these to? Who's buying these? He's getting 20 euros. Right. He's getting 20 euros, and his only answer to me was, ha ha ha, people like you. That was the only thing he'd ever answer, ha ha, people like you. Okay, so, yeah. Right. Well, I mean, maybe it does, yeah. The other interesting thing, now this is highly redacted. While I was in the channel, someone dumped this to the screen. I don't know if it's legit or not. It was someone's entire identity that may have been in a clipboard. I almost wondered if it wasn't an accidental copy and paste. And the thing that made me think it probably was real was the fact that the ATM pin matches the year of birth. And I was like, that's probably real. So it was a person's entire identity. And what that meant to me was, while these guys were, while there were some of these guys who were interested in just selling roots, there was also more going on in this channel than just people, brute forcing accounts, selling them and moving on. So the question is, yeah. No, I did not. I did not, no. I didn't even think of that, to be honest with you. I was like, this is really cool. Right. And again, that obviously is not the person's real name. I did change that. So the question is, what does this all mean? What did I learn from this? I really had a hard time coming up with a conclusion for this talk. Like, I had done all this really cool stuff, I thought, and I was like, well, what does it all mean? And this is the best I got. So other than it was a lot of fun, right, Romania is an awesome country. A lot of these, and we imprison our children, yes. A lot of these folks are purely script kiddies for hire. And I hate the term script kiddies because so many people who use it don't have the skill level that the script kiddie has. So they use it real derogatory, and I'm like, stop that. Like, you can't even do what they do. But these folks really are script kiddies. I told them in the thing, I said, I want to be a hacker. I want to be a hacker. And they said, we're not hackers. We're not hackers. And they said, to be a hacker, you have to know SQL injection. I said, oh, okay. So they were really honest about what their skill level was. These weren't skilled individuals that I was interacting with. They really were just script kiddies for hire. So kind of what the takeaway, use strong passwords. We all should know that. And again, most of their passwords were, root 123, password 123, Beavis. But they also had some longer ones, some more complex ones, but not a single one of them had a space in it, which I thought was kind of interesting. So by putting a space in your password, at least at this point, you would completely defeat this attack. I would suggest running SSH on another port. Not that that's going to get you any additional security, but it does reduce the level of noise. If you find somebody banging away on your port if you use a different port and you find somebody banging away, you should call the cops. But anyways, yeah, this just reduces the level of noise because these guys, if any of you run SSH out on the internet, you'll see it they're just nonstop. They just constantly go and go and go. And interestingly enough, after I caught on to the channel that they were connecting to and the group that it was in that was controlling my box, now I don't know if there was, I was always working with the same group. I was always going to the same place. So my guess is that this is pretty much the group. I'm sure there are others, but they seem to find me all the time. I would also suggest fail2ban, which uses IP tables to block an IP after so many failures to a service. The best thing about that is it's not just SSH. You can do it for FTP. You can do it for other things. Basically, you know, that gives them 6 attempts, and then they're gone. They're blocked. So that's my recommendation, and that's the end of my talk.
So Chris, before you run away, one more round of applause because that was really good.